Welcome to Wesley Podcast. This is Pastor Ray in conversation with you. Welcome to Marketplace Conversations. This is a series on discipleship in the workplace as we look at the issues we face about work and at the workplace. This evening, I'm delighted to have Joanne and Cassie join us for this conversation as we look at the topic of the joy and stresses in education. So hello ladies, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Joanne. Very excited to be here today. I was formerly a teacher in an MOE school, but I have since left to join the private sector. Now I'm currently with a tuition center and I do group tuition for students.
Thank you, Joanne. What about you, Cassie?
Hi, yes, I'm Cassie. So, really excited to be here. I'm currently practicing as an Associate Psychologist in the early intervention setting. So, working with kids with special needs, ranging from autism all the way to intellectual disabilities or cerebral palsy. So.
So the both of you work in the area of education or meeting learning needs. Can you share with us one or two joys in the work that you do? Cassie, begin with you.
I work with a lot of clients, so I can work with preschool teachers, parents, kids, doctors. But I think the two main joys I'll share about is the kids and the parents. So for kids, because I work with kids below 7 years old, they are really pure and they say the most funniest thing. Like I have a kid who just learned the word oof. Yeah. And during a one-to-one session with him, he dropped something. He went like, oof. And then he said it with such pride because it's a new word he learned. And the whole session, he just went like, oof, oof, oof. I was just like laughing along with him. Right. And then another day, a kid just came up to me and just went like, teacher, I'm fat. Then you're like, thanks for telling me, but you can't really say anything more, right? So it's sometimes it's the small things they say that really makes your day, right? To just see how pure they are. And I think working with parents in Singapore, we know that parents tend to be known as like tiger parents and everything, right? But when I actually go on the ground and work with parents, you actually see parents who really care to know their kid at where they are and accepting them for who they are, especially because I work with kids who are different from typically developing kids. And it's quite refreshing and quite heartening to see that parents actually care so much for their child. And this idea of unconditional love is being displayed in that moment of it.
Wonderful. Joe, what about you? What are some joys that you experience?
I think for myself, similarly, I really enjoy the interactions with my students. Now that my job is a lot simpler as compared to before, these are things that I feel that I can enjoy them a lot more. Yeah, I think previously I used to, have a lot of things going on at the back of my mind. So it was hard for me to be fully present with my students. But now when I go into lessons, I'm always very excited to hear what they have to say about their week. I think I'm one of the few tutors that will ask my students like, oh, how was your week? And then this is term 3, week 1. So I ask them, how was the first week of school? And then they're all groaning and all. But it's like, kind of fun to just hear about their experiences and what different experiences are like. Yeah, my kids are a lot older, I think, than yours because I'm doing secondary school. So they do have a lot more to share. Some of their insights also can be very interesting. And I feel that through these interactions, not only are they fun, I'm also learning a lot about different schools, different kinds of families, different ways of doing things. And that's something that I really enjoy. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing about the joys, but what about the stresses and challenges?
Okay, well, for myself, I think now that I'm in the private sector, you don't really have as much stability as before. So one thing that many tutors worry about is whether or not they have enough students, because a lot of us, maybe we are being paid per student that comes in. Yeah, so the stress can be very real if the student count that we have is low. Yeah. The good thing for me is that I do seem to be getting quite a few students coming in. So, I mean, I thank God for that. I see all this as like blessings from Him. Yeah. And another stress that this is giving me then would be, okay, how am I going to manage having so many students again? You know, because I still have to do marking, lesson prep. And then I also feel like it's important for me to be very aware of every student's strengths and weaknesses. But when there are so many, it can be harder. Yeah. So that's something that I worry about now. Yes.
Thanks, Joe.
So I think, as Joe has rightly pointed out, I work with kids who are younger, below 7, and because some of them are non-verbal, so I guess that's where the struggle comes in. You really want to get to know them for who they are, but yet you don't really understand them because they can't express themselves. And sometimes because they can't express themselves, they go out in physical. So I've been bitten from the same kid 6 times in a row to the point I had to get a tetanus jab because he bit through my skin. Yeah, so I think there are some days where work can get very emotionally and physically exhausting, where a kid's way of expressing their anger is in kicking, pinching, slapping to some extent. Yeah, and it's not to say like it's not to portray a bad side of these kids, right? But it's just really seeing how much they struggle. And that's where I come in, right? Really regulating their emotions, calming them down, teaching them how to regulate themselves. Yeah, but I think another struggle then is they only come to this center, they only come for this intensive intervention 2 hours a day, 4 times a week. So the main person who really takes over are the parents, right? So the parents really need to continue these interventions and whatever that has been found to be effective at home and when the kids go out and stuff. But some parents, I mean, naturally in Singapore where we are really expensive to live in, right? They don't have the capacity to do this. And sometimes even though you have grandma there, you have a helper there, they don't really have the education or even the capacity to regulate with a kid, to teach the kids all this kind of materials that we've prepared. Yeah, so that's where I guess the struggle is at, really helping the kid to generalize what he has learned in the intensive intervention back home and to his other settings.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I suppose what you've shared is part of a larger system of education that we have in Singapore. But on an individual basis, with all the stress that you get, whether it's, having enough students, whether it's the day-to-day struggles, how does faith in God help you to cope with all that?
I think for myself, I really trust God a lot in this. I mean, I don't know what else to do. Yeah, because I feel that these are things that actually are really not within my control. I think this was something that I have become very aware of over like all my last few years of working experiences. Like I try and control what I can, but there are some things that are just beyond me, and whether students decide to come on board or not, I feel like this is something that is beyond me as well. So what I tell myself every day is that, like God is the one who decides how many students that I have. If students decide to come and join me for my classes, then I feel happy because they are like God's gifts to me. Like He has entrusted me to be the one to help them through in this journey. But if they don't decide to come to me, I feel like I don't really take it so hard upon myself, because to me that's like, God just telling me, oh, maybe there's someone else out there who's more suited to help them, or maybe they will just find their own path. Yeah, so I just leave it to Him to provide me with the students that I need. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that.
I think as Joe has pointed out, every kid we interact with or every lesson that you plan will not actually go according to what you have originally planned, right? So I think for me, before I go into a session with a kid, on days I'm especially tired, I will always say a prayer, say like, Lord, help me. I don't know how this kid would behave, but I am exhausted, but you help me. Yeah, and I think a lot of times when I go in knowing that God was in front of me, He's taking the first step, it helps me to be more calm with the kid, right? We don't focus on executing the lesson plan or the intervention plan that we have set up, but we focus on loving the kid at where he is.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it a lot easier, right? It's okay if the goal isn't met today, but did the kid leave the session feeling loved and happy? Yeah, because I think a lot of times when we talk about education, it can be very dreaded among kids. If I pull them out to do, teachers say, I'll play with you, but they no, they're not playing with me. It's work, it's more work. Yeah, but how can you make it enjoyable for them that it's not something they dread and something that they can grow from? Yeah, so I think a lot of prayer. I think also when working with parents, there are some parents who I really struggle to love, right? Just because my values and their values are very not aligned. Yeah, but it's in those moments that I really turn to God. And there was one case where I really struggled to love a parent, but through prayer and God really broke me down when I went into that conversation. God helped me to see the strengths of the parent that gave me joy to continue that conversation and not focus on what the parent lacked and everything, but what the parent was willing to help the kid do. So I think God plays a huge part in my career every single day.
Thank you. You know, that this process of surrendering every day, this process of asking God to fill you with His love is so crucial to the work that we do. You know, I'm sure in the line of your work, you see a lot of mental health issues with our next generation. How do you think the system that we have today in Singapore contributes to that? What are some of the stresses that they face and the expectations that they face?
Yeah, so I think in Singapore's education system, we're very grades-driven, right? And there's this term we coin called performance goals versus learning goals. So when we talk about performance goal, your main motivation to do what you do is really to just get a good grade, to get a good outcome, to earn money, for example. But when we talk about learning goal, we focus a lot more on the effort that goes behind it. I didn't get an A, but I did my best. And that's good enough, right? So in the education system, it's very performance driven. And I feel sometimes parents don't have a choice but to force that upon their kids because they need their kid to go into a good school, because the ultimate goal for the parents for a kid to get a job, right? And it's so competitive now. I mean, from what I know, what I learned in P2 is probably what being taught in P1 now. Like, the education system has just pushed forward so much. Yeah, and it's very hard on these kids because developmentally they may not be appropriate. The curriculum may not be appropriate for their cognitive level then, but yet they're forced to really participate in this curriculum. And they don't have a choice. Yeah, so I think when we think about education system, it can force us to be very like outcome focused, right? I just need to get a good grade. And I think that contributes to the whole mental health, anxiety, I'm not good enough problem that we are seeing in the younger generation right now, right? Because not everyone in the class can get an A. There is a limit to how much A can be given out, even in a poly setting, in a uni setting. But yet, everyone is working towards getting an A. Yeah, so when you don't get an A, how does that make you feel? Do you blame yourself for it? Or do you still put in the effort to recognize that I did my best and that's good enough? Yeah, so I think when we just focus on the outcome, a lot of us feel not good enough. We start to get anxious because, what if I can't get into my uni of choice? What if I can't get into my job of choice? What if I can't get into the secondary school of choice? Yeah, so that's one problem of our education system that I think does contribute to the whole mental health thing that we're seeing among the younger generation.
Yeah. Thanks, Cass.
Yeah, I think I agree that it's very performance driven, and a lot of parents also have this mindset as well. But for me, I also think about like how children actually spend their time throughout the whole year. Because I think the whole year feels like a race. You know, every year just feels like a race where you're just trying to rush to, be able to perform during the next exam. And it is really very stressful for the students. You know, like I have students who feel bad when they take breaks, you know, like after school, it's like, okay, you know, they don't feel like they can just switch off. They feel like, now that I'm not in school, I need to spend my time studying. And when they don't, they feel guilty about it. Yeah, maybe a lot of the students I see now are very motivated. But I think they are the ones that really struggle with this issue a lot. Yeah, and their days can be packed, like they end late. I mean, and then they have homework and all the other things they need to do throughout the day. So I feel that for a lot of kids, right, they don't have enough time to rest and unwind. Yeah, and it can be very difficult. I mean, even for myself as a teacher or like any working adult, we need time after work to rest. But for kids, they don't really think about their schedules in terms of like work-life balance, right? For them, it's just work all the time. Yeah, and parents also can be the ones reinforcing this mindset. I've had parents last time when I was a teacher who asked me, oh, can you give my child more work to do because at home he just plays. But I'm also thinking like your kid does need to play, I think it's part of being human, being sane. Yeah, you need time to unwind and just not feel bad about doing nothing or doing what you enjoy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I add something to what Joe said? So I think when we think about mental health, it's all about our emotions and how we cope with it, right? So in our education system, it's always focused on academics or CCE, like character development, basically, right? Yes. Yeah, but we don't really focus on emotional intelligence, or what I guess the term that social media use now is emotional maturity. Right. So teaching a kid how to regulate your emotions is such a big key component of life success, as research has also found. So really, like what we mean by regulating your emotions is that when I feel anxious, do I just let my thoughts spiral? Or do I actually hold it captive and say that it's okay? This is not going to happen every single time. It's just a one-time situation, right? Or even this idea of guilt, right? Is my guilt valid, or is it just something that the environment has placed upon me? Yeah, because sometimes we just go with the flow a lot. I think Pastor Ian said in his sermon this week, right? The idea of productivity is just, I'll just keep going and going and going, but we don't actually pause and think, is what am I doing really helping me in terms of the spiritual growth journey that I'm on? And sometimes as kids, they don't really think about that, right? They just think like, oh, I need to make mommy and daddy happy. Mommy and daddy wants me to do this, I will do this. Yeah, so I think it comes in with parents helping the child to recognize that regulating your emotions is also important. I think in the recent movie Inside Out 2, if you've watched it, how anxiety was portrayed is a perfect visual representation of what anxiety is like, right? We try to create different scenarios to think like, if I studied more, maybe I would have gotten an A. If I do a bit more work now, maybe mommy and daddy will be happy. Because I remember when I was in primary school and I failed my first science test, I went home and I completed a whole assessment book hoping that my mom wouldn't cane me.
Did she cane you?
No. Like she came home at the door and I was just like, I finished my science assessment book. And they don't scold me. Yeah, so there is that fear. And I grew up in the environment, so I can relate to these kids, right? But when I grew up, then I realized it's not so much about just completing all this. There's a lot more in life. And I guess that's where spiritual parenting comes in, teaching your kid that it's not just the tangibles that we work towards, but also the lifelong, the everlasting life that we are working towards. Because, I mean, like they said, to enter God's kingdom, it's like a needle in a haystack.
Yeah. So, it really harkens back to this whole idea of security, your sense of identity. And I suppose parents really have such a pivotal role to play. If they don't have a strong sense of identity in Christ themselves, then sometimes they project their desires for accomplishment and achievement on their children. So in the work that you do, how important would parents be in terms of, as what Cassie shared, helping children find the right identity in God or in Christ? Yeah,
so I think a huge part of my job is, apart from working with kids, is that we work with parents. So we conduct parenting programs, right? Teaching parents how to create that safe space for their kid. And I think a lot of times what we struggle more with is parents taking aside that time to come for these parenting programs that naturally happen during working hours because it's our working hours, right? And what I feel is important is for parents themselves to realize what are the triggers that when my child behaves that triggers me too. So if my child acts up really big, like crying and wailing, does that trigger me? Because when I was young and I was crying and wailing, my mom just told me to keep quiet, right? My mom labeled me as noisy, as pathetic, whatever labels that you receive. And that triggers your negative memories of the past. And in turn, if we don't have that time and space to process it, we just reflect it upon our kid in that moment of it. And if we teach our child that these big emotions are not right, don't have them, then that's when they start to internalize their own emotions, and that leads to what we see in the mental health field. You don't need to be clinically depressed or with a clinical anxiety, like generalized anxiety disorders, but very simple, like dismissing of a child's emotion can lead to low moods, can lead to mild anxiety. Yeah, so I think parents play a very big role in firstly recognizing how their own parents' parenting has affected them, and then whether they want to put in the effort to also help themselves before they can help their kid. Yeah.
Okay. Joe, what about your own experience with parents?
I think for Christian families, children get their impression of God from how their parents treat them. Yeah. And like what you said just now, a lot of parents, they may not be so secure in their identity in Christ, and then they end up projecting some of these expectations onto their kids. So I have had many students who have grown very distant from their parents during their teenage years. I think as a form teacher, I've had to, be kind of like mediator very often between kids and their parents. Yeah, so kids will become distant from their parents, and then parents also will start to get very anxious about why their kids are distancing themselves from them. So they will come and ask me like, oh, is it normal? Is it normal? Why is my son not talking to me anymore? This kind of thing. Yeah, so I think it's quite common for parents to fall into that mode of, always just talking to their kids about their academics. Yeah, so every time, when conversations come up, it's always like, how much work did you do today? What did you get for your exam? Why is this your result, etc. But they don't often talk about like the other aspects of a child's life. I found that like when I used to talk to my students about their studies or their academics, there was a tendency for them to switch off a bit. But the moment you start asking them about their friends or their hobbies and the other things in their life, they have a lot to share. Yeah. And I think it would be very nice if parents at that stage of their child's life, when their child is like exploring all these different things, to just lend a listening ear to their kids, to show them what unconditional love from God looks like, to not be judgmental in their interactions with them.
Yeah, if I may add to that, I think when we're so busy, when we're so overwhelmed, and we have so many problems, because our parents are stuck in a sandwich generation, right? They have to care for their kids and they have to care for their own parents, and it's exhausting. I acknowledge that. But sometimes when we are so busy, we try to find like the most efficient and fastest method, right? And sometimes when God calls us to love sacrificially for our kid, that means sacrificing our time, right? And time is so precious, more worth than money, and more so than money sometimes. Yeah, and I think parents have to then rethink, what does it mean when Christ calls them to love their kids, right? And yeah, this whole idea of just really being there for them when they are upset, giving them that safe space, and also getting to know the child for who they are. I think as humans, we tend to think we know someone just from a first two interaction with them, right? We like this certainty, so we tend to just put a judgment on someone. That's who you are. But I think it's very discouraging when I work with some kids, right? That you see them trying, but they are not reaching the final goal that parents expect. But parents don't recognize that they are actually improving in small ways. They just say that, oh, my child has not become so-and-so, and it's very, very demoralizing on a kid. because he's trying his best, but his efforts are not acknowledged. Yeah, so I think as parents, when I say like getting to know your child for who he is recognizing the effort that your child is putting in to work on not just his academics, but his personality, the struggles that he's going through. Yeah.
Yeah, I think parents and children, like all of us, are on a journey of maturity. And I absolutely agree with you, Cassie, how parents can just take pride, in their children's little steps of improvement rather than imposing them on that eventual goal, which may or may not happen, but that's not the key, right? The key is the journey.
Yeah.
The key is the process. I'm sure, Joe, in your line of work now, and even in the past when you were teaching in school, the kids will be highly stressed about accomplishment and achievements. And even as we talk about